Alright, today's lesson will be about combining the functions algebraically, not graphically. Now yesterday you did, well, let's look at example 1 here. If we were asked to find h of x by adding f of x and g of x, we did a whole bunch of this. For example, we said, well, if x is 2, what would the value of the function be? So instead of looking at the graph, we're going to try to do this a little bit more algebraically. Okay? So, what is f when x is 2? So here is x is 2. F of x is 2. At 2, what is g of x? It's negative 1. So what is 2 plus negative 1? It's 1. So h of 2 is 1. Now honestly, that's still kind of a graphic question. Alright? But we're going to stop looking at the graph and we're going to start looking at the functions like this. So let's quickly do a review. What does f of 2 mean? It means put in a 2 everywhere you see an x and make sure you use brackets. Okay, so you'd get 3 minus 8 plus 20. This would be 15. Okay, let's try f of 0. F of 0 would be 3 minus 4 times 0 plus 5 times 0 squared. That's an easy one. Alright, and then f of negative 1. We'll put a negative 1 everywhere there's an x. Again, important that you use brackets. If you look here, you don't want to lose that negative. Okay, so we're going to get 3 plus 4 plus 5, which is 12. Okay, so that's an algebraic skill, but you already know how to do that. We're going to use that for doing questions like this. Okay, before we do that, we'll wrap up the graphic questions. Let's do d of negative 2. So this is f of negative 2 minus g of negative 2. So we'd go to negative 2, f of x is 0. G of x at negative 2 is 3. So you'd get 0 minus 3, which is negative 3. Okay, and let's try p of 6. This is f of 6. That's star, that's multiply, times g of 6. So let's go look at 6. Here's 6. F of x is 3. G of x is negative 5. So you'd have 3 times negative 5, which is negative 15. Okay. So now let's get into more algebraic. There's no graph attached to this. Now we could go find the graph, but you don't need to. Okay? First of all, let's do the domain and range of these two graphs, just so we remember what kind of graphs we're looking at. Okay, what's the domain of f of x? Well, f of x is the root of x, so the domain is from 0 to infinity, and the range is from 0 to infinity. Then let's do g of x. What kind of graph is this? That's a line. So the domain is negative infinity to infinity, and the range is negative infinity to infinity. Alright, now remember that the overlap, the domain of the new function, which is going to be h of x, will be the overlap of the previous two functions. You don't even need to know what the graph looks like to know this. Okay, but before we do the domain and range, it says to write the explicit equation. Now, explicit doesn't mean you're supposed to swear when you do it. It just means you're supposed to write it out algebraically. And this is actually super easy. We're going to write f of x plus g of x. What's f of x? It's the root of x. What's g of x? It's x minus 3. You don't have to simplify. Okay? Do not simplify unless what? Unless it says simplify. This one does not say simplify, so you don't need to. Okay, I have no idea what that graph looks like, but the domain is going to be the overlap. All right, the domain is going to be 0 to negative infinity. Now the range, you normally will not be asked to do it, but if you are, to find the range, use a table of values or graphing technology, which you guys don't get to do for your tests. Okay, generally you will not be expected to find the range, okay, unless you're given a graph. All right, in this case we're not though, so let's do a quick little evaluation here. Okay, I know that my x values can only be positive, and if I put those values in, what is h of x going to give me? Well, let's put them into, first of all, the root of x. Okay, so you would have the root of x here, and then we would have x minus 3 here, and then this is going to give me h of x. I'm just writing this out. I think you could probably do this in your head. Okay, if you put in x is 0 here, you're going to get 0. If you put it into the next function, you're going to get negative 3. If you add those, you get negative 3. Let's put 1 into each of these functions. You'd get 1, and you'd get negative 2. If you add those, you get negative 1. Okay, I'm actually not going to do 2 and 3, just, well, we can, but they're not going to be nice. You're going to get root 2 here, you're going to get negative 1 here, and if we add those, you're going to get root 2 minus 1. That's a bit vague, not sure about that. Okay, and then here you're going to get root 3 and 0, and if you add those, you're going to get root 3. Again, not really sure what that looks like. Okay, but then if I do 4, I get 2, and 1, if I add that, you get 3. This is enough for us to figure out what the range is. What's your smallest value? Negative 3. What's your biggest value going to be? It's going to keep getting bigger. Okay, again, normally you will not be asked to do the range. Okay, let's try another one. This one says p of x is f of x. I don't know what that's supposed to be. That's supposed to be multiplication. Okay, write an explicit equation. So p of x is going to be the root of x times x minus 3. There's your explicit equation. It does not say simplify, so I'm not going to. What's the domain? Again, it's going to be from 0 to infinity. What's the range? Well, we'll do this one, but I don't think you would ever have to do this. Okay, so I'm going to go f of x, and I go p of x. What can I pick? Those values. Let's put those x values into this equation. So you're going to get 0 times negative 3. This is 0. If you put in a 1, you're going to get 1 times negative 2. So you get negative 2. If you put in 2, you're going to get root 2 times negative 1. So you get negative root 2. By the way, this is smaller than that. So I think I've already found the smallest value. Okay, then I'm going to skip root 3 because it's not nice. Well, I guess it's okay because it's going to be 0. It's going to be root 3 times 0, so 0. And then you're going to get 2 times 1, which is 2. So the range is going to be from negative 2 to infinity. Okay, again, range not a big part of this course. In fact, if you look at the next question, it doesn't even ask for the range. Okay, all we're supposed to do is write out the explicit function, root x over x minus 3. What's the domain? Well, the domain is the overlap, 0 to infinity. But, remember with division, we have to consider something else. You have to consider that x cannot be 3. Okay, so that's that extra condition that we talked about yesterday. When you divide, there's a special condition you have to consider. What is going to make the denominator 0? Okay, let's try another one. Same question. Why don't you guys try and do this on your own before you listen to the video? Okay. So the domain and range of f of x and g of x. What's the domain of f of x? It's negative infinity to infinity. This is just a line. So negative infinity to infinity. Then you have the absolute value. Oops. That was supposed to be here. The absolute value, if you remember the absolute value, it looks like this. So the domain, again, is negative infinity to infinity. The range is going to be from 0 to infinity. Okay, write the explicit function. H of x is, we're supposed to subtract. So f of x, that's x plus 2, take away the absolute value of x. Don't need to simplify it. What's the domain? Negative infinity to infinity. I don't need to look here. I'm looking here. What's the overlap? Okay. P of x, the explicit function. Again, this is supposed to be a multiplication. So I have x plus 2 times the absolute value of x. If you want, you can put the little dot for multiplication. What's the domain for the new function? Again, what's the overlap? It's as simple as that. Okay, and then we've got a division. So d of x is x, what is it again? X plus 2, and g of x is the absolute value of x. So the domain is going to be negative infinity to infinity, but x can't be 0, right? Because I'm looking there. What's the range? Well, we can do a quick little table of values again. So since the domain is negative infinity to infinity, I'm just going to pick a couple of positive and negative values just to see what happens. So if I pick negative 2, you're going to get 0. If I pick negative 1, you're going to get 1 over 1. If I pick 0, there's a vertical asymptote at x equals 0. If I pick 1, you're going to get 3. If I pick 2, you're going to get 2. Well, this is weird. I don't know what that looks like just by looking at these values. You have 0, 1, then you have a vertical asymptote, then you have 3, and then you have 2. It kind of makes it confusing. If we tried to draw this, you have a vertical asymptote here. All right, and if you're looking at the negative values, okay, maybe we should put a negative 3 up here. If we put a negative 3 there, you're going to get negative 1 over 3, so you'd have negative 1/3. So it looks like it goes something like from negative to positive. I don't know. Can't quite figure that out. And then over here, if the x values are positive, this will always be positive. And so you're going to get something that looks a little bit strange. I don't know, do we have something like this? Maybe? I'm guessing. Again, this is why we won't have range questions on the test. Okay? So we'll leave that one out. Okay, it looks like the range, though, is negative infinity to infinity. Okay, consider the function h of x. Okay, literally the easiest question you're ever going to get. I hate these questions. I probably won't ask you, and maybe a multiple choice. It says, write explicit equations for 3 functions, f of x, g of x, d of x, so that if I add them up, I get that. Alright, so here's what I would do. I would say let's make f of x x squared, let's make g of x negative 2x, and let's make d of x equals negative 3. That's it. Because if you add these now, you're going to get the right equation. Okay? Now, if you wanted to do it a different way, here's a really easy way to do it. You could say f of x is x squared minus 2x minus 3. You could say g of x is 0 and d of x is 0. You know, there's so many different ways you could do this. Hello?
Hey, for when you got food at McDonald's, did you just go through the drive-thru?
Yeah.
So it's just normal that way?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Bye. Another option would be to say, you know, g of x could be negative 3 and 0. As long as the three of them add up, you get the right answer. Okay, so there's lots of answers you could do. Again, I'm not going to do this to you. What would I do here if I wanted to subtract 2? Well, how about this? F of x is x squared minus 2x minus 3. And how about g of x is nothing? There, now if I subtract those two, I get h of x. Okay, if you don't like that, here, put that. Right, there's so many different answers you could have as long as you subtract f of x, take away g of x, so that you get the original equation. Okay, now this one, where it's multiplication, I know what they want you to do. They want you to factor it, right? Because if you know that h of x is x squared minus 2x minus 3, this is x minus 3, x plus 1, so then we could say f of x is x minus 3, and g of x is x plus 1. But honestly, I don't know why you would take the chance that you make a mistake there. Why don't we say f of x is x squared minus 2x minus 3, and we could say g of x is 1. Because when you multiply those, you'll get the right equation. Okay? Same with division. I know they want us to do some factoring and kind of figure it out like that. But I would say keep this as easy as possible. There is a little bit more difficulty when you're dividing though. Okay? If we want f of x over g of x to be x plus 1, I would say let's make f of x x plus 1, and let's make g of x 1. Now, careful when you do this. Some of you might want to get kind of smart and say, oh, well, we could also do f of x equals, say, x times x plus 1 over x, right? And we could say g of x is x. Here's the problem. Those are not equal. Even though these cancel out and give me x plus 1, this one has a non-permissible value that is not mentioned in the original question. Okay? So be careful with that one. That one would not be acceptable. Okay? Now, it would be okay if you really want to divide to put some sort of a different number there. So you could say x is 2 times x plus 1 and g of x is 2. That would be okay, because cancel those, you get x plus 1, you don't have a non-permissible value. Okay? So, we'll stop there. All right, good luck with that.